Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you for stopping by again. This is one of the quick virus updates. It's not as quick as I especially wanted it to be, but it's because things do change, and I've got to share that with you. As far as any specific details as to the opening of the country and so forth, that is not changed. I'll refer to it, though, in a little while. I follow this pretty carefully. I've been working for over 50 years, as most of you know, all over the world in developing countries and now emerging markets and so forth, and a lot of different areas, and health is among them. And so I've been through a lot of different epidemics of one sort or another in a lot of places. So this particular pandemic is most unusual, and it's been a surprise right from the beginning. Even though it was eventually going to happen, we all knew it was coming eventually. We just didn't know when. Here it is, and we're still trying to figure it out. It is not a run-of-the-mill flu by any stretch of the imagination. That is not tied up the entire planet and its entire health system over the last several months. What's going on right now is really quite unusual, and we're still trying to learn it. And some of the stuff that's been coming out recently has been quite negative and not very encouraging. We have now a group called long haulers, which I think is a stupid phrase for it. The long haul being the sense, for those of you for whom English is a second language, means long term. And they're simply people, and they include those in 20s and 30s, different ages, who become infected, are infected with COVID-19, but they don't die, but they don't get well. They just continue to show the effects. So they are infected, and they continuously are infected. They may be infected for weeks, 2-3 months. The estimates run in the 5 to 10% range. I think that's probably a little high for a variety of reasons. I've looked at some of the work done on it. I think there's more work to be done on it, but these people definitely do exist, and that's a troubling thing because that means long-term management for their care. And some days are going to be really awful days for them, and other times not so bad. Not a good thing. So still a great deal to be heard about that one. The one that's most disturbing, perhaps, well, not disturbing, the most disappointing was in regards to a study that's just been published just a couple of days ago in The Lancet, which is a British medical magazine, very, very well-respected magazine, and a major study in Spain. Now, what it boils down to, you may have heard of the term herd immunity. And what this boils down to in a simple fact is that for many diseases, viruses, if you get even just a mild case of it, even a very mild case of it, your immune system reacts to it, destroys it, and then remains at a high level, you might say, a high level of alert, and it will prevent that. Anytime that virus shows up again, it will immediately destroy it. Now, it differs from one virus to another. But just because the virus is extremely serious doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be, you're going to be immune to it for a long time or a short time or anything else. For years, I got my smallpox vaccinations, and they were good for 10 years, and thank heavens. But I've had several of those, and yellow fever and so forth, back in the days when these were real threats. So a 10-year period was not that unusual, and others was 6 months. So you had to know more about the disease to know what the length of time would be. And one great hope with this particular COVID-19 was that it would trigger this immune response in people, so that even if you've gotten a light variety of it, you would have immunity to it for a substantial length of time, hopefully for a few years. At least 6 months to a year, but really we're talking 2, 3, 4 years. If you could get 70 to 80% of the people with this immunity coming not from, God forbid, dying from the disease, but from very mild cases of the disease, and most of them have mild cases, then they have immunity for several years. That's great, because then the virus, leaving an infectious person, has more and more difficulty finding somebody, so to speak, to infect, who hasn't already been infected. So that's what they meant by the herd, that as the bulk of the people in the population have developed this immunity, the virus may not disappear, probably won't, but it becomes a smaller and smaller and smaller problem, and it can be much more easily controlled once that situation's in place. And the people who've been infected and come through it okay can go on about their business without worrying about it again. So the question has been, is this the case? And there's been some, with this virus, and there have been some small studies done in China and the U.S. There was one done about 10,000 people in Switzerland. But the big one that people have been waiting for is the one that's just been reported on a couple of days ago. And that included more than 60,000 people in Spain. As you know, Spain has been hit very hard with this. They had no trouble coming up with tens of thousands of people who had been tested positive for coronavirus. And what they did is they followed them, and they to see whether a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, and so forth, they had an immunity. They're looking for the herd immunity function, and they're looking for the majority of people to have this immunity. And then that could have been great news. Well, for this, 61,000 some people, the percentage turns out to be 5%. And no guarantee that those are going to last for any significant period of time. Long story short, and I've looked at the study itself and also the various reports on it. Forget herd immunity. It isn't in the cards. It doesn't appear that we're going to get any benefit from it at all. So having had a COVID-19 isn't going to provide you with protection from getting reinfected at a later date. So we're dealing with something here that we're still coming to grips with, and that took time because you need to, check it over time. You can't just decide that in a week. They had to have some weeks to follow it, some months. They've had it. So on to the vaccination is going to be the way we're going to have to go. And that's what we're going to have to hope for as a vaccine comes up to protect us, because at this stage we don't have another easier way to hope to come through this. So with all this cheerful news coming out, it's not particularly friendly. We also have additional news, too, that's coming out all over the place from countries, and in the U.S., for instance, states and so forth, who are coming out of quarantine and into quarantine and then out of quarantine and then back into quarantine and so on, trying to get out of the this sort of very constricted area in order to improve the economy, to increase business, to get people spending money, enjoying themselves and so forth, getting people back into jobs and getting employment figures back up. And this is very critical to the economy, obviously, in the short and long run. But I've been through a lot of this stuff, and I just say this, that I understand that, and I very much look forward to the day that I get more than a few hours a week to wander the streets of Panama City, and where people like yourself can come down. And hopefully that's going to be very soon, at the end of this month or August. I don't know. But I can see that we're all just on pins and needles here. There's no clear indication of what the results are going to be, except that if you pull out too soon, you have problems. And it can be devastating to suddenly release people from this and then have to reimpose it again. It just makes it much even worse than it was before, so to speak. However, the economy must go on. Well, I agree. 100%. No problem there. But I'll tell you, and I mean this very seriously, our health systems here in Panama, but all over the world, have been pushed to the limit. And these are the human beings out there, and you've, I'm sure, been praising them and been thinking wonderful things about them because of the work they do, the long hours and day after day after day, and the fear they have about themselves getting it, and many have and have died. And even worse, the fear of taking it back to their families. So many of them end up sleeping wherever they can find a place at the hospital and not going home to protect the family. The pressure is intense, and no matter where you go, and that can include Panama. Now, we have enough beds, enough units now that we have, these people are worked very, very hard. They're wonderful folks, okay, but they're not on the verge of collapse or anything of this sort. They're not to that extreme yet, and we do not want that to happen. So what has been going on is the government here has paid a huge emphasis on finding people who have the virus. And so they've been testing for some time. They find hot spots. They're usually poor neighborhoods where people are living in very close quarters. And they go door to door, and everybody gets tested, and anybody who's got it gets treated. And this pushes up our case list, and it means that we're finding some of the worst cases, and they will pass away, some of them, so that increases the actual total of deaths and so forth. But we're not in a game. One thing I appreciate here is that no one's playing a numbers game here. They're very much aware of it, but I think the ministry personnel who are involved with this, I think, are doing their very best job as medical personnel with medical responsibilities and to taking this job extremely seriously. So what they're doing is they're trying to get as much of our local population that has it in the units and under treatment now, while it's not too difficult to do that. They're opening up 300 beds down at the convention center, and not just beds, they're more than beds, they're units basically for more potential for more cases, because they know that they have to eventually open the country and people have to come in, and whenever that may be. And we may, as some countries have unfortunately experienced, have an increase in cases, and that can be very difficult. And it's so complex at this stage of the game. We've got so many deals going on here because so many discussions, because both countries have to agree to exchange people, because you can't have your planes going one direction with a full crowd and coming back empty because your people are, you're not allowed to bring any of their people into your country, this sort of thing. So we have to have these agreements with a number of different nations. We are the most connected Latin American city, and this is a lot of work involved with that. And it's going to be nerve-wracking. There's a lot of people here. We really want this to happen. But what I'm saying to you, in effect, is that we cannot lose those health personnel. We cannot see the health apparatus collapse, the system collapse, because if it does, the economy goes with it. All right, so let's get that straight. The economy, you can borrow money, you can pour it in, you can try to keep people employed, keep them paid, find ways to provide them with the support. But with the health, when the health sector collapses and people just are overwhelmed, what are you going to do? We don't want to get to that point, and we're going to avoid that. And I suspect if that meant closing the country down again, that's just what will happen. But we're hoping not to. But we're expecting an increase, so we're getting this additional beds, we're looking for additional doctors, young doctors who've just gotten their training finished and what have you. A lot of stuff's going on to try to be prepared. The end result of all of this and all this other news that's coming in, which is certainly well known to people in the health sector here in Panama as well. They read. If I know about it, they knew about it before I did. In their minds, this moment of truth is coming up at some point. And they've tried to put it off as long as possible. And we are seeing some improvements here and some of the statistics, and no trouble going into the details here. There is some movement in the right direction, and we'll hope that it works. But what I'm saying to you now is I'm not going to be able to come on and tell you whether your airline is going to be flying when it says it's going to be flying. We have so many different airlines and over 80 destinations here involved. And it's going to be the decisions made in airports and capitals all over the world. Their economic decisions, their political decisions, their health considerations, and all that. I'm sure there'll be plenty that will exchange people with us and flights with us. And we're going to hope that our procedures, which are the same ones they're using, to test people when they arrive, although I really think the temperature alone is hardly enough. But hey, without a quarantine, again, everything is going to be done on a day-to-day basis. And we'll see what happens. And your job, if you're planning to come on down, is fine. Don't depend on anybody other than yourself. You go in regularly, every day, and check. If you've got reservations, certainly, or if you're planning to get one as soon as one's available or so forth, you're going to have to check directly, because I can't possibly keep up with it all. And I can't tell you. I mean, COPA will do what COPA thinks is best, and if it can get started on August 7th or whatever, it most certainly will. But if the ministry or the government steps in and says, just a minute now, we have some flights coming, we've got a problem here, we're going to have to hold off for a while, don't be surprised. Because we are trying to save the economy. We want that, but we've got to save the health personnel and our health structure as well. Strengthen it, save it, treasure it, bless it. They're wonderful folks. So that's it. That's what I wanted to share with you. Everything may unfold the way we're hoping it will. That in 2-3 weeks, and maybe even before the end of July, some airlines may come in and so on. We will see. But if you're waiting for anybody here to give you the green light without going in yourself and looking, that's a mistake. You have to take responsibility for that and go in and check on a regular basis. And we're just going to have to live with that until these things are underway, are working, and are regular. And then we can begin to relax. But to get the ball rolling at the first flights, that's something that everyone's going to have to take personal responsibility for. And if I hear anything, that's definitive, but I won't. You'll hear about it before I do if you're checking in on your airline at their website. You'll hear it before I do. I can't possibly follow them all. I wouldn't even try. So that's where we're at the moment. And I'm hoping it's all going to work out. Let us pray that it does and that everything holds together. And it's the same thing being said in 180 countries all around the world. So there's nothing Panamanian about this. This is human, and we're dealing with it as best we can. And I have great faith we're going to come through it. I'm not, long term, no, I'm not worried about that. But I know this next period of transition is a very tough one. And I just wanted to say to you that we will want it to work. Everybody wants it to work. And I'm sure you do too. So keep in touch with it. And I will be back again, but now we'll be talking about other subjects. I've been looking into this in more and more detail because I know so many of you are concerned. Now maybe I can take a look at some other things. So thank you very much for stopping by. I wish I could give you something more definitive, and maybe we will be able to do that at some point. But keep your eyes open, your ears open, and let's hope we can all get together for a cup of coffee at some point in the future. Thanks again for stopping by, and subscribe if you haven't already if you want to be kept up on any other reports that come in. And ring the bell beside the subscription button, and you'll hear about it, any new video quickly. Thank you for your patience. Thank everybody for their patience everywhere. We're going to make this. We're going to make it work. Thanks. Bye.